In this video, I beat the entirety of Skyrim the way Bethesda intended. From the character creation all the way up to defeating the epic Ebony Warrior. Now one of my favorite battles in any video game ever. I came across this idea after watching Avati's awesome video, beating Skyrim the way Bethesda intended. It's honestly a great video that really got me fascinated with playing Skyrim again. However, Avati only played till he defeated the dragon attack at Whiterun. I thought, what if I beat all of Skyrim following this 1,000 page book guide to the absolute word? And what the hell would that even look like? I actually got this book for Christmas when the special edition released, and I tell you what, the way it recommends you play the game is actually really fun, especially because it's all encompassing. It shows you every quest and every part of the world. It guides you in every skill and every way to play the game. I really felt like I got a complete breadth of Skyrim, and I loved every moment of it. But firstly, before I get into the rest of this video, I do want to make a point. Bethesda certainly intended the way to play the game is whatever way you want, which is the beauty of Skyrim. However, this book guide does tell you a recommended way of playing the game. For example, it implores exploration over fast travel. It wants you to see and do everything you can, even if it means making yourself cry after killing poor old Parthenax. So first things first, Skyrim's ever-daunting character creation. The book makes things very simple. It lists 10 different character archetypes as a guide. So I chose the Spellsword, which the book states is a female dark elf who uses a one-handed weapon and a spell. It also recommends using light armor, and it even goes so far as recommending Lydia as a preferred follower. The book is very detailed, so I'll spare you all the fluff and just tell you the interesting stuff, which surprisingly, I think there's a lot of. Straight away, the book makes it loud and clear that we need to focus on leveling our skills. It tells us not to just lockpick the main cell, but also all of the other empty cells as we escape Helgen Keep. In fact, the book is very specific, especially early on. It mentions using a fire-based spell to set fire to this pool of oil, and it even goes into so much detail as telling us to pick up this specific coin purse, and also how to pursue these 6 frostbite spiders. It recommends using ranged attacks at first, and then following up with a melee weapon. But this is where things actually become very interesting, and for me, enjoyable. Once we've escaped into Skyrim's wilderness, the book states we should follow Ralof. Ralof tells us that it would probably be best if we split up. And every single playthrough I've ever done of Skyrim, I've listened to this and just run off into the Skyrim wilderness, off the beaten track. However, the book has a completely different way of playing the game. It recommends following Ralof, and it recommends always staying on roads and paths. This increases world encounters, and also just makes it so you never fall off a mountain. Another thing I wasn't expecting is that if you do follow Ralof, he actually gives you a guide of the path to Riverwood. Now, for whatever reason, I really enjoyed this trek to Riverwood with Ralof by my side. I feel like the book is very heavy on making your experience as immersive as possible. And so it suggests catching some salmon, shooting some rabbits, which unfortunately I didn't see, and picking any wildflowers or other ingredients along the path. Once we reach the peaceful Riverwood, when Gerda offers us a gift and her key, the book recommends we essentially rob her and just take everything. At all times, the book wants us to be as frugal as possible, as it's very economy-based. It recommends we always sleep in Riverwood until we get our own home. So, with the book's element of immersion and role-playing, I did have a little nap before I headed off to Whiterun. But we're not quite done yet in Riverwood. The book wants us to hit up the alchemy lab in the Sleeping Giant to brew up some potions, something which I have never done in Skyrim. And I know that sounds bad because it is. I'm just not the type of person to focus on every little thing. In fact, I kind of suck at open world games. So this book is kind of perfect for me. Crushing up ingredients whilst a bard plays in the background was highly relaxing. The book also wants us to check out the forge before we go. Another aspect of the game I usually neglect but have come to love. I should note now that yes, I've played Skyrim before, but I'm not some veteran of the game. So this book is actually perfect for me. It gives me a guideline to fully immerse myself in this role-playing world. And I tell you what, I enjoyed this so much more than I thought I would. Now, the book is very meticulous. It even goes into great detail on the optimal route to Whiterun from Riverwood. And like I said, I have to follow the book. But I must say, this route is very beautiful and easy. Once in Whiterun, the book tells you to practically ignore everything and everyone for the moment. Talk to the Jarl and get your ass to Bleak Falls Barrow. And I'm just going to mention here again, the book is very, very detailed at the start, but later on, it lacks detail because it assumes you know what you're doing. It's here that we learn a few tricks and tips about this barrow. For example, before this locked gate, it tells us to sneak and watch the bandit patrolling the room, as he just happens to be quite an idiot. The book also states to not rush after Arvil, as he'll run into his own demise, distracting the Draugr and allowing us to manipulate the traps to our own advantage. The book is very heavy on this fact, something which I never really even thought of before making this video. So at this stage, as someone who's only ever played Skyrim casually, I've already learnt a lot more about the game, and the book really increased my enjoyment of the game. Also, I didn't have to worry about solving any puzzles, as the book has all the solutions. So with the Dragonstone collected, the book recommends we sell the Golden Claw to the Riverwood trader for a large sum of gold. Another great tip in our journey. It's at this stage the book wants us to learn how to equip for a great adventure. It suggests we revisit the Riverwood Forge and Alchemy Lab, and then it suggests, surprisingly, we should hit up the Whiterun Market area to sell and buy some goods. Before we head on our next adventure, the book then suggests we use the enchanting workbench. Although I didn't have any soul gems at this stage, I could disenchant and start leveling up the skill. Now we have to face our first dragon, and because it is our first, the book goes into great detail on how we should face it. It suggests using bows and long-range magic at first, but then melee weapons once the dragon lands, stating always to attack from the side of the dragon. After slaying the dragon, the book then recommends we buy a house inside of Whiterun, which is very crazy considering how early on we are. It costs 5,000 gold pieces to buy a house, and at this stage I hadn't saved even close to that amount. So in following the book, as soon as I reached 5,000 gold pieces, I bought a house in Whiterun, which I must say is very cozy when done up nicely. Now it is time for a very long journey from Whiterun to High Hrothgar. Very fortunately, I can take Lydia with us, who just happens to be our character archetype's preferred follower in the book. And so we head off along the path to the book's instructions also. Now, this is where the book makes it even more imperative that we stay on the roads, but it does tell us to stray off sometimes to discover different locations along our path. It makes it clear to not go inside of these locations, but rather just discover them so you can fast travel to them later on. But the main reason it tells you to follow the path so you don't get stuck up the mountain or fall off and die, which I certainly did when I was younger. Once I reached the Greybeards and Old Dealings were done with them, the book finally suggests some fast traveling, specifically to Whiterun, from which it recommends we use our new Whirlwind Sprint to fasten the process to our next quest. So the book discourages fast travel unless you're at the top of High Hrothgar. I do also want to mention I came across this old orc here. I say this because it's been like a month since I ran into him from when I'm saying this, and I still remember him clearly. For some reason, he's one of my favorite characters in Skyrim. I don't know, I'm weird. Within the depths of Ustengrav, I played it pretty normal, but the book did point out some secret chests. For example, one was under this waterfall, and the other required Whirlwind Sprint to reach. Also, once we obtain Jurgen Windcollar's horn, the book makes another suggestion. If we return it to Ustengrav, we receive a free dragon soul, which I thought was worth it, and seeing the book suggested it, I did it. But it is at this stage, I feel like the book starts to change a bit. It's told us the basic information on how best to naturally level up my skills and just play Skyrim in general. And now it just focuses more in depth on each mission, though 95% of it is probably just common sense. But I do follow the guide to a T still. For example, I did not stray off and do any side missions unless it advised me, because the book does show a certain order to defeating all of Skyrim. As you may notice, it started with the main quest. So, on skipping forward quite a bit, as I was escorting Esbern out of the Ratway, it was kind of hilarious because I was on the lookout for an assassin, because, well, the book told me an assassin was going to try and kill me down here. This assassin, Shivari, might just be the unluckiest or maybe just the worst assassin to ever live. Now, this is probably the most enjoyable experience I got out of the book. You see, in a normal Skyrim playthrough, I would just fast travel to make the fastest route. But the book suggests traveling to Alduin's Wall on foot. It states, travel the path along Falkreath Hold, which involves fending off any enemies along the way and fighting as a trio. This takes longer, but allows you to raise levels and watch your teammates' considerable fighting talents. So, in the name of immersion and following the book, I did this. And I tell you what, I just love this journey. Yes, it was very long, but I've now learnt my favorite aspect of Skyrim. It's simply traveling along in the wilderness, immersing yourself into the world. And for some reason, for me, this is always elevated when being joined by certain characters from the quests. For example, journeying with Esbern and Delphine across this huge distance just made the experience all that much cooler, like the book said it would. So now I've collected the Elder Scroll and defeated Alduin in battle. It's time to help negotiate a truce for the time being. This is when the book suggests choosing a side in the Civil War, and really keeping this choice because it wants you to really stick it to the other side you aren't allied with here at this truce. Now, as for choosing a side, the book says it's completely up to you. It doesn't recommend either option. As a Dark Elf, I probably shouldn't have gone Stormcloak, as they do openly discriminate against Dark Elves, but hey, the book doesn't suggest otherwise. At this stage in the game, I didn't even know that was a thing. I hadn't gone to Windhelm and gotten openly discriminated against by a local.
A big hole. Throw all them Dark Elves and Argonians in it, and see why we let them Dark Elves live inside the walls. We should kick them out like we did to the Scalebacks.
Like I mentioned before, the book is all about gaining the most knowledge and experience possible. So for the first time, it recommends going off the main story for a tiny detour. It wants us to do the Greybeard's quest now, and then kill Paarthurnax. This is because if we kill Paarthurnax first, we won't ever be able to complete the Greybeard quests because they will barely tolerate our existence. And we do have to kill Paarthurnax in order to do the Blade quest. So I'm really sorry Paarthurnax, but I had to kill you in this playthrough. It genuinely did not feel right doing this, because he didn't do a single thing wrong, he's just living peacefully on top of a mountain. But the worst thing is, the book even has the audacity to tell you to use Fire Breath, the very shout the dragon taught us, against him. So with Paarthurnax's death, we chase after his brother and eventually kill him inside of Sovngarde. So what does the book suggest we do next? Well, apart from continuing to level up our skills and progress our weapons, armor, and magic, naturally, it covers the companions' quests. Of course, we find out these companions are werewolves, and so the book recommends that once we become one, to use the beast form throughout all of these quests, which I found an absolute blast. Playing as a werewolf in Skyrim is genuinely so much fun, and I know I'm late to the party, like a decade, but I just want to say this game is seriously something special. Also, I can't forget to mention that I did buy a house in Whiterun around this stage, as I finally had enough gold pieces. So after completing the main Companions quests, the book does go into depth on Companions' Radiant quests. So I did make sure I completed them too, at least once each, because these quests are actually infinite. As most of you guys probably know, I'm the one who's catching up here, I think. Next, the book goes into depth on the College of Winterhold quests, which I must admit is probably my least favorite part of the entire game. I don't hate it, but Skyrim is just so bloody good that even the College of Winterhold quests I don't think fondly of. Also, the book doesn't really say anything of great interest whilst playing through these quests. It does suggest some tips like not attacking these vampires so they fight on your side, and also just tips on certain bosses like their vulnerabilities and how to best take advantage of these weaknesses. The book also covers the Ritual Spell Radiant quests, which require your magic skills to be of level 90. So of course, I couldn't do this now in order of the book. Remember, the book states it's imperative you level up your skills naturally. So I had to do this later once all my magic skills were past 90. Now, the book focuses on the Thieves Guild quests. It shows specific larcenary targets and where to find them, secret passages into thieving jobs, and also the best paths for sneaking. And so, through following the book, I became the leader of the Thieves Guild. The very last thing you can do, I'm pretty sure. Except for the infinite quests, of course. Before making this video, I didn't even know the Dark Brotherhood even existed. But it's at this stage in the book that it recommends we find Cicero on the road north of Whiterun. You can help him by convincing this farmer to fix his wagon, or you can report him to a guard for being suspicious. The book kind of hilariously notes that reporting Cicero to the guard results in the farmers being murdered later on by Cicero. As the book tends to side with more experience-based choices, I did actually report Cicero. Everything was completely new to me with the Dark Brotherhood, and I found the entire experience a lot of fun. I kind of needed the book for these quests as everything seemed kind of hidden and mysterious. Also, the themes and atmosphere is just a lot darker, which I wasn't expecting. Through the Dark Brotherhood, I was given a new home and also a horse, Shadowmere, who I travelled all across Skyrim with and back again. Also, in the newly reformed and decorated Dark Brotherhood, we have a torture room, which the book tells us is a great way to find some treasure. By interrogating all 4 victims, we are given the locations of 4 different treasure stashes, which I thought was also really cool, which I've said 100 times this video. Now, I was really looking forward to the Civil War quests, and to be honest, I was allowed to just sit back and enjoy these quests for what they are, because the book isn't too crazy with information during this war. The biggest piece of advice the book gives you is to delay objectives and focus more on staying alive and hitting every foe in your path. This way you level up your skills faster, though it does point out this is a fine line and to be very careful when doing so you don't die and waste a bunch of time. With the Civil War over, the book now wants us to complete all the Daedra quests, the majority of which I wouldn't even have a clue existed without this book. The book is actually more useful for finding the Daedra quests than actually how to beat them. Not that they're hard, but rather because they're kind of hard to find sometimes. Again, prior to this video, I'd never done any of these Daedra quests before, so this was all new to me. Quests like the Taste of Death, where you join a cannibal cult, and a Night to Remember, where you wake up hungover after a big night of drinking with a Daedra, were some of my favourite quests in all of Skyrim. Also, one-hitting a dragon first go with the epic Maroon's Razor was a definite highlight, and just in general, the Daedra weapons are sick. I know I'm like 13 years late to saying all this stuff, but hey, at least it's a new fresh voice commenting, and the fact that it's 13 years later and it is still awesome is awesome in itself. Now the book goes into other faction quests. It wants us to do the Blade quests, then the Bard College quests, and finally the Temple quests. All of these quests are really quick and easy to do. I did actually find the Blade quests quite cool, even though I had to kill poor Parthenax to begin them, but recruiting certain members to the Blade I thought was a really cool touch. The Bard College was helpful for leveling up some skills, and within the Temple quests is the Book of Love quest, where you hilariously match fix a bunch of couples alive and dead. I don't know why I love these kinds of missions so much, but for some reason I do. The book then eventually leads us to the Bonds of Matrimony, where we have to get married. The book states your gender, age, and race matters not. If you're attracted to someone, go out and catch their hearts. The first potential spouse the book lists is Aela, I don't even know how to pronounce my wife's name, the Huntress, whose condition for marriage is beating the companion's quests. So now through the book, I'm married with a house. Something I don't think I would have ever done if it wasn't for the book's instructions. Though there are a lot of benefits from having a family in Skyrim. So now with the main story and faction quests completed, the book wants us to dive into the side quests. The first side quest the book mentions is to solve the mysterious murders of a serial killer in Windhelm. And through this quest, we end up actually owning a house here, which I eventually make my main home because I just really like this house. Anyway, after the murder mystery quest, the book wants us to defeat the Ebony Warrior, as it is a side quest. Of course, you have to be level 80 to even begin this side quest, so I left this to the very end. Personally, I've always thought of the Ebony Warrior as, in a sense, beating Skyrim. Considering Skyrim is an infinite game, that, for me, has always been the end point. But for now, I've still got the rest of the side quests and all of the DLC to go, and a lot of levels to increase. There are a lot of side quests, so I won't cover all of them, but probably the most important of all the 25 side quests is the Lost to the Ages quest, where you're able to make an ethereal crown. The book states this crown is very powerful, and probably the most powerful ethereal artifact, as it retains the last standing stone ability you held, granting you its effects in addition to those of your current stone. The book makes it very clear that if you want to level up fast, wearing this crown is the best way to go. So I did. I used the Lover's Stone, which the book recommends my character archetypes uses, and then whatever other stone would help me level up my main focus at the moment. When it comes to the DLC, I feel like the book thinks if you made it this far, then you know what you're doing. Because the book just repeats what's happening in the gameplay and story, rather than giving you any real directions like at the beginning of the main story. This is the same for the Dawnguard quests and the Dragonborn quests. So whilst I don't have much interesting stuff to say about the book and the DLC, I do want to just mention something that I thought was kind of interesting. Does anyone else much rather prefer the Dragonborn DLC to the Dawnguard? Like I said, a lot of this game is a first time experience for me, and I just notably had a lot more fun doing the Dragonborn questline than the Dawnguard one. I actually really enjoyed Solstheim, the Black Books, the Lovecraftian Hermaeus Mora, and Miraak. And again, I'm not saying the Dawnguard quests were bad, I just hold Skyrim to such a high standard, I suppose. Towards the end of beating all of the quests listed in the book, I still wasn't anywhere close to level 80 and the Ebony Warrior. So I started focusing completely on leveling up my skills. Now the book states you should increase your skills and level up naturally, rather than trying to find ways to exploit the game, as in fact it can make your adventure harder, since you'll lack the gear and tactics needed to survive high-level combat. But the book also states that getting every skill to 100 equates to reaching level 80. So up to this stage, I'd followed the book and leveled up my skills naturally, but now with most things completed in the game and nothing else really to focus on, I went hard at leveling up my skills. I really enjoyed practically pickpocketing the entirety of Windhelm and then selling everything to Cornelia in the Thieves Guild, to then decorate my house in Windhelm based off the stealings of Windhelm. Also, during this time of leveling skills and exploring Skyrim, without the guide of the book, I met an orphan who I adopted. I never would have thought in Skyrim that I would have a whole family. So, on leveling the skills that just take a long time to level. Alchemy, for example, I just went around Whiterun and collected from the land. But soon after realizing how slow this is, I ended up buying ingredients from all the different alchemists around Skyrim, making one big batch of potions, then selling them back to the alchemists, and also to Cornelia and the Dremora merchant who I possessed from a black book. This way I quickly leveled up my speech and alchemy to level 100. Also, whenever in battle, I would use my alteration, conjuration, and illusion spells, often to level these up as well, which I thought was a lot easier than I was expecting. Smithing was also easy, as I just hit up a Dwemer ruin and smelted the material down to make dwarven bows. I then enchanted all of the dwarven bows to reach 100 enchanting. I trained my block skill by getting repeatedly hit by a giant, and also my heavy armor the same way. This is going to sound really nerdy, but training with a shield against a giant is pretty badass. Restoration, destruction, bow, one-handed, two-handed, all leveled up completely naturally to 100. Out of every skill, the only one I kind of exploited was illusion, as the muffle spell gives you XP every time you use it, even if there's no enemies around. Finally, with all my skills level 100, when returning home to Whiterun, the Ebony Warrior stands giant amongst the city's entry. The book actually goes into great detail on how best to defeat the Ebony Warrior. But first, if you don't know who he is, the book defines him as a warrior who's done all that can be done and exhausted all avenues of adventuring save one. You are to be his final challenge. The thing I love about this battle is that the Ebony Warrior mirrors your own character. At level 80, you've done all there is to do, and the Ebony Warrior is your final challenge. Of course, you can never truly complete all of Skyrim because it's an infinite game, but with all the main and side quests completed, it's close enough. You can actually fight the Ebony Warrior in the city, but the book recommends to meet him in the wilderness of his last vigil. Otherwise, the whole city gangs up on you too. The book also tells you the Ebony Warrior is carrying a few potions of healing. It wants you to steal these potions so he can't use them in the upcoming battle, which is pretty smart. The book also wants us to take in multiple weapons, as the Ebony Warrior can use a disarm shout, obviously disarming you of your weapon. So I wore my best Daedric armor and bought my best Daedric weapons, all of which had double enchanting on them. The book states once we meet him at his last vigil that we should make the first strike count. You see, the Ebony Warrior is an all-round nice guy. He doesn't attack until we do. The book recommends we hit him with our most powerful strike first. So I sneak attacked him. He came back at me and I killed him with one hit of the Daedric Razor. So I hope you guys enjoyed okay, I'm joking. I generally felt like this was unfair, and so I reloaded my game. which I instantly regretted as the Ebony Warrior is by far the hardest enemy in all of Skyrim. Yes, in my opinion, a lot harder than Karstag. I have every skill level 100, and I'm using all of my best stuff. The gear I've collected for hundreds of hours, all for this purpose of defeating this one man. I even used my invisibility cloak, secret of protection, my ancestor's wrath, and my dragon aspect, yet I was still struggling a lot. I kept dying and dying to him. Eventually, I just went face to face with him and got lucky, I suppose. My Daedric armor and greatsword was enough to do a bit of damage, so I could follow up with some firebolts. The book does state that the destruction perk impact even staggers the mighty Ebony Warrior, so it suggests abusing this perk, and also fire because apparently the Ebony Warrior is slightly more vulnerable to fire damage. So with this knowledge that the book has given me, I defeat the Ebony Warrior. Like I said in the intro, one of the coolest fights in any video game for me, because it just felt like every single action and thing I did over these many hours culminated to this very moment.